Nathan Cole never imagined that one winter morning would flip his quiet life upside down. He was just a simple mechanic, tucked away in a rundown garage at the edge of town. Grease under his fingernails, old country music humming from a battered radio, and the comforting smell of motor oil were the things he knew best. Fixing cars paid the bills, and fixing wheelchairs for kids whose parents couldn't afford repairs was his silent promise to a little sister he'd lost too young. He didn't want applause, just a small way to ease the ache in his heart. That morning, the cold air bit through the half-open garage door as Nathan wiped his hands on an old rag. He glanced up when he heard the low purr of an engine, far too smooth for this neighborhood. A sleek black SUV, polished to perfection, crept in and stopped right at the entrance. For a second, he thought maybe they were lost. Rich folks never came to this side of town. The door opened, and out stepped a woman, whose presence alone seemed to make the garage look even smaller. Eleanor Grant. Her name was whispered in business circles and printed on every city billboard. She looked immaculate in her designer coat, her heels clicking sharply against the oil-stained concrete, but her face told a different story. Tired eyes, a clenched jaw, and a kind of desperation that money couldn't hide. Nathan stayed silent as a nurse stepped out from the back seat, gently lifting a frail young girl wrapped in a soft blanket. Her hair was thin, her small feet hung limp in the air. She couldn't have been older than 7. And the girl's eyes found Nathan's, wide, curious, and carrying more bravery than he'd ever seen in any adult. Eleanor stepped forward, struggling to steady her voice. She held out a weathered newspaper clipping, yellowed at the edges. It was him, years ago, when he'd made a crude leg brace to help his sick sister stand for the first time. "I've searched everywhere," Eleanor said, her words trembling. "Doctors, specialists, surgeons, they all failed. Someone told me about you, about what you once did." Nathan's throat tightened. He glanced at the photo and then back at the little girl in the nurse's arms. Memories he'd buried under years of grease and grit started pushing through. He wanted to say no. He was just a mechanic, not a miracle worker. But the little girl smiled at him, shy but hopeful, clutching a small stuffed bunny. That smile undid every wall he'd built around his heart. He rubbed his hands on his overalls, took a breath, and finally nodded. "Bring her inside," he said quietly. "Let's see what I can do." Inside the cluttered garage, he cleared space between battered car parts and rusty toolboxes. Eleanor watched silently as Nathan lifted the girl onto a wooden bench covered in a warm blanket. He spoke gently to her, asking her name, making her giggle when he tapped her nose with a pencil. He scribbled rough sketches on scraps of cardboard, his mind already racing with ideas. Outside, the city moved on like always, cars honking, sirens wailing. But inside Nathan's garage, something long dormant stirred awake. Maybe, just maybe, he could fix something no one else could. Nathan worked through the night, the garage alive with the soft hum of old machinery and the quiet tick of his battered wall clock. He had laid out every piece of scrap metal, worn belts, and salvaged motors he'd been saving for years. Bits and pieces that once seemed useless now had purpose again. The little girl, Emily, sat propped up on a stool nearby, wrapped in a blanket too big for her tiny frame. Eleanor dozed lightly on a chair in the corner, exhaustion etched deep into her expensive makeup. Every few minutes, Emily's soft voice broke the silence. She asked him what this part was for, why that wire connected here, or what the bright blue sparks meant when he tested the small motor. Nathan answered every question like it was the most important one in the world. He couldn't remember the last time someone looked at him like he was more than just a grease monkey. When the prototype brace was finally ready, Nathan held it in his hands like it was made of glass. It was rough, patched together with the kind of care only desperation and love could craft. He tested the hinges, checked the padded supports twice, and when he was sure it wouldn't fail, he turned to Eleanor. She woke with a start, eyes wide when she saw what he held. Her hands trembled as she helped lift Emily and settle her on the bench. Nathan kneeled, adjusting the brace around Emily's fragile legs. Emily flinched at the cold metal but didn't pull away. She trusted him, and he felt that trust like a weight on his shoulders. "Ready, kiddo?" Nathan whispered. Emily nodded, clutching her bunny to her chest. He braced her gently, steadying her under her arms. Eleanor knelt too, one hand hovering near her daughter's back, afraid to hope. With a deep breath, Nathan counted softly. 1, 2, 3, and slowly let go. For a moment, nothing. Emily's thin legs wobbled, her tiny feet brushing the cold floor. Then, with a squeak of the brace's joints, she shifted her weight. Her foot planted, then the other. She was standing, unsteady, clinging to Nathan's sleeve, but standing. Eleanor gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she watched her daughter take the tiniest shuffling step forward. Nathan stayed right there, ready to catch her, but Emily didn't fall. She giggled instead, a sound so pure that even the old radio in the corner seemed to pause. When she took a second step, Eleanor let out a sob that filled the tiny garage. She dropped to her knees, hugging her daughter so tightly that Emily squealed in surprise and delight. Nathan stepped back, wiping grease and tears from his face at the same time. Outside, the first rays of dawn slipped through the dusty windows, catching the shine of the makeshift brace. Nathan knew he'd return to fixing rusty pickups tomorrow. But tonight, for this little girl, he'd done something no rich doctor or fancy surgeon could, and that was enough.